All right, so today is May 18th, 2025. We have a great honor of having Zenshin Florence Caplow with us. Let's see, she's a Soto Zen priest, and I think you were ordained by Norman Fisher and got Dharma transmission from Bruce Fortin. Let's say she's got a lot of practice experience, and let's say you're a Dharma teacher, you're a change coach. You've written a couple books, or one book, Hidden Lamp, right? Two books.
Three coming out. Another one coming out soon.
Beautiful, yeah. And you are a Unitarian minister, and we're living in Illinois, but now you're living in Washington State. And let's see, I'm taking Florence's class right now, Practices for Frightening Times at San Francisco Zen Center Online, which has been really fun. And then I think you have some Hidden Lamp study groups, is that correct? And then also a group, Dancing in Dark Fields for Illness and Pain, which I think is an online group, and which is ongoing, right, Florence?
There's both on. You know what? We can spend a little time if somebody reminds me at the end. I can kind of talk through some of the things I'm doing because yes, there's an ongoing and also a kind of intensive 6-week.
Beautiful. Yeah, love for you to do that.
Yeah.
And then Florence is, generously offered to give the Dharma talk today, and I think the name of your talk is Stagger Forward Rejoicing, which is a line from a poem called Atlantis by W.H. Auden. Okay. Did I introduce you properly?
Oh, that was lovely.
It's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming today.
Mention that we're old friends.
Oh yeah, we're old friends. We did this training program together for 3 years, and yeah, not a nice feelings. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all. And yeah, it's really great. I think maybe this is the third time I've spoken. It seems like about. So, and it seems like a wonderful group. So I'm glad you have each other, especially in these times. It's so important. So I'm going to give, you might have to forgive me. I'm going to give a talk that is full of all of my favorite poems that are supporting me in this particular moment in the world. And it won't just be poems, there'll be some of my own thinking and writing as well. But for those who maybe poetry is not your bag, apologies, but hopefully you'll all appreciate hearing some really beautiful words. Most of them are actually by people who are also Zen people. So I think I'll just start by saying, as Kirk mentioned, I'm now living in Port Angeles, Washington. It's been a long time. I was marooned in the middle of the Midwest for 8 years, but I'm really a Northwesterner. I've lived here since I was 8. I went back to help my mother in the last part of her life, and now here I am, back again. Very, very happy to be here, and I really love the Northern Olympic Peninsula. I had the great pleasure of living in Port Townsend for 2 years. I don't know if anyone's been there, full of old Zen people. I'm pretty close by, I'm about an hour away. And this is actually relevant to my talk. So I've only been here for about 3 weeks. And sometime in week 1, I had my first set of guests. And we were driving around town, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something on the facade of a house, and it was letters that were, actually, they were probably a foot high, metal letters all across like the front gable of a house. And I was intensely curious, so we went around the block and parked in front of the house to see what it said. And what it said had 3 words: stagger, onward, rejoicing. And I was completely blown away. I just thought, it really, and then in a little corner with a little, like bird kind of perched there, it said W.H. Auden, which is how I knew where the quote came from. So I I'll be saying more about why this touched me so much. I have to say that I immediately thought that I had definitely moved to the right town, because any town where people would put a quote like that on the front of their house was my place. So, and I just think that there's a lot of wisdom in it for us for this particular time that we're living through. And also, it reminded me of the tremendous power of poetry. So, so that's a little intro to what I wanted to talk about today. And oh, it really felt particularly relevant because, well, before, even from well before the election last November, for the last couple of years, most of my Dharma talks and my Unitarian Universalist sermons and things that I've been teaching in classes have had to do with, what are the practices? How do we live with some kind of grace in a time of such suffering and damage to so many people? How do we stay joyful and carrying on, not turning away, not falling into despair or cynicism? In a way, this is one of our time. And as far as I can tell, maybe some of you have found ways to be graceful, but I'm not sure that there is a way to be graceful, to somehow dance like a ballerina through the wreckage. But we can stagger. We can keep going. And I think this will be what I'll try to convince you of over the course of the next 20 minutes or so. I think we can rejoice in the courage we see around us, in how people are coming together, in the light on the mountains, in the smiles of the people we care for, in our sanghas, in so many different ways. So I decided right then and there that these are my new words to live by: stagger, onward, rejoicing. And I immediately came home. I knew, of course, I think all of us have heard, or most of us probably have been through school, have heard of the name W.H. Auden, but I certainly couldn't have told you much about him or about his poetry. So I came home and first I looked up where this quote came from, and it does come from a poem called Atlantis, which was written in 1941 in the middle of the Second World War. So that tells you something about the context of this particular quote. So then I got curious about Auden himself, and the more I learned, the more I understood why he might have written those words. So I'll tell you a little bit about him. He was born in England in 1907, and he was a gay boy and a gay man. And by the time he was in high school, he was already part of a circle of young gay men who were writers and bohemians, some of whom would become some of the most well-regarded poets and writers of their time, like Christopher Isherwood, if you've heard of him. And those were his friends. And like his companions, many of them, he was a pacifist and dedicated actually throughout his life to addressing social and political problems as a poet. He lived in Germany during the 1930s. And so he saw firsthand the rise of the Nazi Party, of fascism in Germany. And in 1939, this is so amazing to me. Again, not a time, of course, where one could be openly gay, but in 1939, he married a woman named Erika Mann, who was a lesbian actress and the daughter of the writer Thomas Mann. So she was German, and he married her to provide her with a British passport and a way to escape Germany. he left Germany himself not long afterwards, and uh, eventually was in several different countries, ended up in America, later becoming a US citizen. And in that same year that he came to America, he met a young American man, and they were together all the way until Auden's death in 1973, long time. Theirs was not an easy relationship. It's described as stormy. But this was, of course, a time where there was no way to be openly gay partnered men. But this was a constant relationship, a deeply devoted relationship. Stagger onward, rejoicing. So knowing that, I had an even deeper feeling for this this statement on this house in a little town on the northern Olympic Peninsula, so many decades after Auden had passed away. So I think that sometimes people think that poetry doesn't actually have anything to do with politics, that it doesn't have to do with the real world. But I actually feel like, where would we be without poets and poetry? And that there are things that can be said in poetry that really can't be said any other way. And I think as I said earlier, I've been offering, especially since the election, and even starting on election night, various ways for people to gather and share how they're doing, and explore practices for this particular moment. And what I found is that for me personally, and for the people that end up coming to the classes, maybe I'm just forcing the poetry on them, I don't know, but it seems like poetry matters more than ever, and really can be tremendously supportive, point us towards something subtle but powerful in our lives and responses to this time, to kind of shine a light. And I've really started to think that in a way, poetry is as important to my survival right now as food and water and taking walks around the block. So I said I wanted to share some of my favorite poems today. And here's one written by Jane Hirschfield. Those of you who have had something to do with San Francisco Zen Center would know that she is a longtime Zen practitioner in our particular lineage, and also just a really incredible poet and human being. And this is the poem. It's actually, she writes a poem every New Year's, which is a very Japanese thing to do, actually. Counting this New Year's morning, what powers yet remain to me. The world asks, as it asks daily, and what can you do to change my deep, broken, fractured? I count this first day of another year, what remains? I have a mountain, a kitchen, 2 hands, can admire with 2 eyes the mountain, actual, recalcitrant, shuffling its pebbles, sheltering foxes and beetles, can make black-eyed peas and collards, can make from last year's ripening persimmons pudding, can climb a stepladder, change the bulb in a track light. For 4 years, I woke each day first to the mountain, then to the question. Can you still hear me? I'm double checking. Yes, good. I got a little message that it was unstable. Okay, I'll keep going. If we go into silence, we can just enjoy the silence. For 4 years, I woke each day first to the mountain, then to the question. The feet of the new sufferings followed the feet of the old, and still they surprised. I brought salt, brought oil to the question, brought sweet tea, brought postcards and stamps. For 4 years, each day, something. Stone did not become apple. War did not become peace. Yet joy still stays joy. Sequence stays sequence. Words still bespangle, bewilder. Today, I woke without answer. The day answers, unpockets a thought from a friend. Don't despair of this falling world. Not yet. Didn't it give you the asking? And as I've sat with this poem over the last few months, after I think Jane Hirschfield posted it somewhere and I saw it, I've been thinking, actually, I realized, it took me a while to realize that the middle of the poem where she's describing doing things like making collards and black-eyed peas and a persimmon pudding is probably exactly what she was doing on that particular New Year's Day. And also that her question is a koan. It's one of those big unanswerable questions. And the asking itself is the answer. So I find that very touching. So continuing this theme of staggering onward, I wanted to share some words from a friend of mine, the Zen poet and translator and teacher Levitt, who lives on Salt Spring Island, really wonderful guy up in British Columbia. And he wrote this on Facebook in February, quoting another one of my favorite Zen poets, David Budbill. This is what he wrote. Day after day, poetry immersion, English, Chinese, Japanese, what a life I'm allowed. I even get to take a break so I can go out and shovel snow, indigo and white. When I lift my head, that ancient Tibetan phrase, oy vey, comes out of my mouth as a spontaneous poem with all its wisdom and compassion attached. So, since I know that all over the world right now, the oy vey poetry mantra is being chanted, by some as prayer, by some as worry, by some as battle cry, I thought I'd toss this into the mix to help it all be stirred around. Will it help? Yes, definitely. How? Every reminder of connection, of not just what we share, but of what we are, and that's what poetry and all art does, each in its own way, is at the heart of the matter. So, okay, here is the poem Bugs in a Bowl by a wonderful poet, sadly gone now, David Budbill. This is not, what I'm about to say here is not Peter Levitt, it's actually me. Many years ago, I was in a fantastic cafe, now gone, in Port Townsend, and up on the wall was a broadside of this poem. And at that point, I'd never heard of David Budbill, but I loved the poem with passion immediately when I heard it. And much of David Budbill's poetry is a little bit funny as well, which is a great quality in a poet. Here it goes. Han Shan, that great and crazy, wonder-filled Chinese poet of 1,000 years ago, said, "We're just like bugs in a bowl, all day going around, never leaving their bowl." I say, that's right. Every day climbing up the steep side, sliding back, over and over again, around and around, up and back down. Sit in the bottom of the bowl, head in your hands, cry, moan, feel sorry for yourself. Or look around, see your fellow bugs, walk around, say, hey, how you doing? Say, nice bowl. So, little David Budbill for us today. So I wanted to say a little bit about this rejoicing business, because you might be feeling doubtful about that piece, given all that's going on. And over the last few years, I've been teaching classes on for people with chronic illness and pain, based a lot on the work of Darlene Cohen, who is a very important teacher and the person who ordained Kirk, and who dealt with severe chronic illness. I don't know if Kirk's given talks on Darlene, but she was a very unique human being. She was also a person who suffered her whole adult life with very severe rheumatoid arthritis. And her really radical teaching was about the importance of pleasure. And this is something that I have really continued in my teaching, really drawing on her work and her book, Turning Suffering Inside Out, and my own contact with her, that really the harder our lives are, and believe me, the people who come, especially to those particular classes, are often suffering in every possible way. And so this intentional cultivation of pleasure is a very, very powerful practice, actually. And but I think sometimes, maybe particularly if we are not or do not appear to be living lives where there's tremendous suffering, we might live very privileged lives where we know that bad things are happening to other people in other places or because of their citizenship status or whatever it may be, but we may not feel that we have a right to rejoice, a right to feel joy. I don't believe this. I think that actually, if the world presses us down to the ground, we are not able to act. And so that just like Darlene and the people with chronic illness, intentionally paying close attention to where joy arises in our life and to celebrate it is actually really, really important. So years ago, I was crossing the Golden Gate Bridge for the very first time. I mean, I'd done it many, many times in a car in my times of living in the Bay Area, but I had never walked across it. And I had a very, very dear friend who was visiting me, and we decided that we'd walk across the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was a beautiful day. I remember it was kind of sunny and misty at the same time, a little bit of fog in the air as it can be there. And there were pelicans flying underneath the bridge, and the wind was blowing, and we were having a wonderful conversation, really good old friend. And we noticed as we got to the middle of the span that there was a car parked on the far side, on the side that faced the ocean, with no one in it. And then as we got closer, we realized that someone had jumped and that the Coast Guard was coming out from there's a Coast Guard station right near there. And that literally it had happened moments before we had seen that car. The police had not even shown up yet. So that was a, now actually my understanding is that after much controversy, there are nets beneath the Golden Gate Bridge so that someone doesn't jump. But my response at the time was immediately to start chanting for that person and for whatever had driven them to do that. But it also brought up, later as I thought about it, a really profound question. Because here we were on this beautiful day, walking across the bridge, talking and looking at the birds, and someone else was experiencing so much suffering that they jumped off that same bridge. So I actually wrote an essay about it called Body Exposed in the Wind. And I just thought I'd read you a little bit from it because it's actually relevant to this question of whether or not we have a right to joy. There is a kind of koan or riddle that I've been contemplating for a long time, sometimes with much Sturm und Drang. How is it that any moment in the world contains so many different worlds? At the moment that my friend and I were laughing and watching the pelicans, another person 100 yards or so away was hurling themselves into the void. At this moment, as I write this, or as you read this, thousands of people are dying, thousands of people are being born to joyful parents, thousands of people are in the grip of intolerable suffering. For a long time, I wondered whether I had a right to feel joy with that much suffering happening at the same time. Now I feel that I have an obligation or a responsibility to add my notes to the great chord of a single moment, whatever that note may be. As we watched the Coast Guard boat searching the water, I heard words from an ancient Zen story in my mind, body exposed in the golden wind. Although I didn't remember it at the time, the whole koan, this part of the koan goes like this. A monk asked Chan Master Yunmen, how is it when the tree withers and the leaves fall? Master Yunmen said, body exposed in the golden wind. It had been years since I'd heard my teacher, that would have been Norman Fisher, lecture on that koan, and I didn't remember what he taught. But when the words came into my mind that day, a clear thought rose with them. We are all, every one of us, like a person falling from the Golden Gate Bridge. We are utterly exposed and vulnerable. We are headed for the dark. We are people falling from the bridge while applying our makeup or preparing our arguments in the courtroom. Meanwhile, the ocean is glimmering and the pelicans are flying by and the golden wind is around and through us everywhere. So this is what poetry or koans can give us, a glimpse, a feeling, maybe we can't even name it, for a possibility, or even the joy of the experience of the poem. And I just have one more poem I wanted to read. So recently, I've started reading the poetry of a Chinese American poet whose name is Li Young Lee. And a little bit like W.H. Auden, to really understand and hear this poem, I think it really helps to know about Lee's life. He was born in Indonesia in 1957, and both his parents were political exiles from China, from mainland China. And shortly after he was born, his father was arrested in Indonesia and held in prison for a year. And then the family, as soon as he was released, the family fled, and they were in Hong Kong and Macau and Japan, and finally came to the United States in 1964 when Lee was 7 years old, where they were able to establish new lives as refugees. And there is an extra poignancy to me in considering this now, when at a time when people fleeing in that way might very well not be able to establish new lives in the United States. So he wrote this extraordinary, exultant poem, and it seems very appropriate as the spring blossoms all around us. I know it's doing it in Port Angeles. I'm sure it's doing it in Portland too, or wherever you are. So as you listen to this poem, no matter what is in your heart today, let these words really fill you with their beauty. It's called From Blossoms. From blossoms comes this brown paper bag of peaches we bought from the boy at the bend in the road where we turned towards signs painted peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowship in the bins comes nectar at the roadside. Succulent peaches we devour, dusty skin and all, comes the familiar dust of summer, dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days, to hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, then bite into the round jubilance of peach. There are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background, from joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to impossible blossom to sweet, impossible blossom. I think I'll just stop right there.
Thank you, Florence. Let's have a short sit. Steve.